What's good, everybody? It's your boy O'Shane Duke Jackson back at it again with another episode of Celebrity Junk. So, Paul Pierce has a podcast called The Truth, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. It's actually a really good podcast. Paul Pierce and his female co-host have this great back and forth dynamic, a real yin and yang energy that keeps things engaging, and I genuinely enjoy it. Now, this podcast is actually where I first saw Dr. Cheyenne Bryant get exposed. And I mean that literally. It was the first time I personally watched her get caught up in what appeared to be outright contradictions. You could see the cracks forming in real time. Even Paul Pierce acknowledged it mid-conversation, essentially signaling to his co-host that they had her because she was walking right into one contradiction after another without realizing it. And honestly, looking back, that podcast episode felt like the beginning of the end for her credibility. If her career or her public image is experiencing a slow decline right now, that appearance is arguably where it started, because what we're seeing play out today with Cheyenne Bryant traces back to that moment. Her academic credentials have always been a point of contention, but now those questions are moving from the background straight into the spotlight. She has publicly stated that she doesn't hold an LCSW license, yet she still presents herself as a therapist, despite not being legally permitted to use that title without the proper licensure. So instead, her website uses the term coaching as a workaround. And beyond that, there have been a growing number of concerns about the authenticity of various claims surrounding her professional background.
People want to tear Mrs. Dr. Cheyenne down.
Dr. Cheyenne.
And you have to listen what she said, because I'm like, yeah, maybe she isn't a credentialed doctor like everybody else is who's in this space, but she's made a lane to where she became famous off of being in this lane, and so many people want to do it. And she said, I heard her, she said, I created my own.
And I'll be honest, Paul Pierce's position on this actually caught me off guard a little, but he did make one point worth addressing. He said, look, you heard how she said she created her own lane, right? And I want to tackle that directly, because Dr. Cheyenne Bryant did say exactly that. Here's the thing, though. A lot of people create their own lane based on a foundation of lies. Let me give you a personal example. I attended medical school. I completed the coursework, but I never obtained my licensure. So, because of that, I do not walk around calling myself Dr. O'Shane Duke Jackson. I just don't. If I were out here branding myself with that title, I would be actively misleading the public. Since I'm not licensed to use it, I go by O'Shane. Simple as that. Now, here's the reality. If people genuinely connect with your message and your information is solid, the title doesn't matter. Good content speaks for itself. You don't need doctor in front of your name to earn people's trust. But what Cheyenne Bryant did was strategically use that academic title as a key to unlock bigger rooms. Because if she had walked into those spaces as simply Cheyenne Bryant, a coach, no credentials attached, a significant portion of those interview opportunities likely never happen. Realistically, maybe 80% of those doors don't open. But the moment you attach doctor to your name, the entire perception shifts. Now you're an expert. Now you get dressed up and introduced a certain way. Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, brilliant, beautiful, controversial. That combination is a perfect storm for media attention. And then, on top of that, she built that name not by grinding from the ground up, creating her own content and growing her own platform the way independent creators do. She leveraged already established platforms, getting on Cam Newton's podcast, appearing on Club Shay Shay. All it takes is one of those appearances to go viral, and the momentum builds from there. That's not creating your own lane. That's borrowing someone else's highway and rebranding it as your own. And once you go viral on an established platform, the trickle-down effect takes over. Radio, television, more interviews, more visibility. So when you strip it all back, the foundation of that entire career was built on a title that may not have been legitimately earned, and that's a disservice to the public consuming that content.
She created her own lane to where Listen, if people are going to listen to my advice and I can change lives and I can help you go from a negative to a positive regardless of my credentials, do I have to go to school to be qualified? Like people feel like you got to go to school to be qualified to be at a certain level. And I get it. Like if I feel like if you're changing lives and you're able to say walk away from Dr. Cheyenne like, damn, that really helped me out. Just because she put doctor in front of her, I mean, people do that all the time. You think she's the only one? No, she's the most famous.
All right, so this whole argument about defending her right to use the word doctor because other people use that title without being licensed physicians, here's where that falls apart, specifically in the context of psychology and mental health. In that field, the word therapist carries a very specific meaning. A therapist is typically a person who holds an active license issued by a governing board. Dr. Cheyenne Bryant uses that term strategically, and the reason is straightforward. It leads people to believe they are speaking with a licensed mental health professional. But she is not licensed, and she is certainly not going to volunteer that information to you up front. So when you pay for her services, you're paying for coaching, but the framing around it suggests something far more clinical than that. Think about the real-world consequences of that. Say someone comes to her struggling with bipolar disorder or clinical depression. Dr. Cheyenne Bryant cannot legally diagnose, prescribe medication, or develop a legitimate treatment plan for that person. Why? Because she's not licensed to do so. So she uses the language of therapy to attract clients, but the moment you actually land on her website, the word coaching quietly appears. That switch is not accidental. That is deliberate. And what makes this even more concerning is that a large portion of the people being misled are women seeking real mental health guidance. Which brings me to an interesting point about Paul Pierce. A significant theme on Paul Pierce's podcast is holding women accountable. And I think part of the reason Paul Pierce gravitates toward dismissing academic credentials is rooted in his own relationship with education. He attended the University of Kansas and was there from roughly 1995 to 1998. He left without graduating to enter the NBA draft. He went on to have a legendary 19-year career, spending the bulk of it with the Boston Celtics. So from his perspective, school simply wasn't the path, and that's a valid personal experience. But here's where the logic breaks down. Just because school wasn't necessary for Paul Pierce's success doesn't mean it's irrelevant for everyone else. Other people believe deeply in education. Other people place enormous value in licensure and professional credentials. And here's the contradiction that cuts right to the heart of this whole situation. If academic achievement truly means nothing, then why is Dr. Cheyenne Bryant leaning on a doctoral title to build her brand? You cannot simultaneously dismiss the value of education while using an academic credential as your primary marketing tool. You don't get to have it both ways. And then there's the accountability piece. When someone operates with the mindset of, "I don't answer to anyone but God," that attitude doesn't stay contained in the professional space. It bleeds into everything. And what ends up happening is that guys like Paul Pierce encounter that same energy in a personal or romantic context. And then they turn around and tell black men to look elsewhere for partners, go overseas, get a passport, because the women here aren't willing to listen. And I understand the frustration behind those comments, even if I don't fully agree with the blanket conclusions being drawn. But here's what I want people to really sit with. When black men allow unaccountable behavior to go completely unchallenged, and I'm speaking specifically about women in the black community, the people who ultimately suffer most from that dynamic aren't black men. It's other black women. It's daughters watching their mothers model that behavior and absorbing it as normal. And what tends to happen over time is that the people around you simply reach their limit. They stop engaging. They stop working with you. They stop showing up for you. What sounds empowering in the short term eventually isolates you completely. And that's when the humbling comes. That's when the exposure arrives. And suddenly, the person who refused to be held accountable by anyone is standing alone with no one left to point to but themselves, while simultaneously trying to hold everyone else to a standard they never applied to themselves. That dynamic plays out constantly in communities where trust is already fragile. Everyone